Hello and welcome back to the Fight and Talk 2 channel with myself, Mr. Fight and Talk, joined as always by the fantastic co-host of the show, the eloquent analyst over there with the thick beard. How are we doing, Prath?
Yeah, the beard is looking fuller than ever. I need to go and get my hair cut. April 12th, we're allowed to roam out in the world now. So hopefully going to go get that haircut and look as fresh as George.
That's it, looking as fresh as the man in the casual corner. Look at that. He looks 10 years younger at least. How are we doing, George? You are looking fresh, brother.
Oh, I feel so fresh. It's unbelievable.
Wow, you look fresh, man. And we can see it on your face as well. You've got the mop out your eyes now, so you can see the fights more clearly.
I've lost like 20 years off my face in like 2 hours.
You have. And
so the running joke of the podcast is that we can't tell whether George is 20 or 60, and now we can confirm that George is 20.
I think what are you like 25? No, 25.
I'm 25. I'm a quarter of a century old.
Quarter of a century. Wow. No, you're not as old as Jared Marshall, though, who's making his return at the weekend. See, I slipped it in. I volleyed off that quite nicely. No, but straight up the fights this weekend. We've got quite a few people that have some insane records this weekend. We've got Andrei Arlovsky fighting as well, coming off of a loss. We've got, as I just mentioned, Jared Marshall coming off a loss as well. Jeremy Stephens, who I assume is coming off a loss because he usually is. It's not the most exciting card for us. We were talking a little bit before the show, and there's a few names on there that you can really pick out and go, wow, I think that's going to be a really fantastic fight. And then there's a few fights on there that I feel are, and we feel as a collective are, definitely stepping stone fights. Drakkar Klose versus Jeremy Stephens is one of them fights that's going to be like, right, this is a little stepping stone for Drakkar Klose. Arlovsky, we can only assume he's going to get his nose broken within some round because his nose is completely battered. I think he's waiting until he fully retires before he gets the whole little rhinoplasty job. But Prath, what excites you about the fights at the weekend? Is there any fights on the card that really catch your eye that you want to really delve into?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'm not going to lie, fellas. Not a lot of huge names on this card, but these cards typically end up being like the most exciting ones, which is kind of weird. So, we're sitting here ragging on it, and it's probably going to be like all finishes. That's just the rhetoric of how the UFC seems to work nowadays. So some of the names that kind of stand out to me on the card, we've got Luis Pena, lightweight fighting Alexander Munoz. Alexander Munoz, I know, is a big, he's a big time fighter out of Uriah Faber's gym. And he's someone that vouches for him. Luis Pena, obviously former AKA Daniel Cormier. Now he's training with ATT. So that's a good fight.
Is he moving up in weight? Was he at 145 before? Because you said lightweight. Is he at 155 coming up?
Yeah. So I think he was kind of flitting between the two divisions. His last fight was against Karma Worthy, who is a lightweight as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he did fight a couple at 145. He's very, 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 very thin, very, very tall for that weight class as well. So I think kind of how we were talking about Derek Brunson last week, how if he went down to welterweight, he would be that kind of skinny, tall guy. Kind of like reminiscent of Anderson Silva at middleweight. When he went up to light heavyweight, he kind of was a bit thicker, but when he was at middleweight, he was very, 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 very thin and long, and that was his kind of like trademark striking style. And I think Luis Pena kind of embodies that a little bit. Very long reach, is able to keep guys on the outside and kind of pepper them with shots. So yeah, Luis Pena is a great one. Abdel Razak Al Hassan. Typically a finisher as well. Finish or be finished is kind of his kind of game plan here. So I'm not too sure too much about Jacob Malkoon. I believe he's a Australian New Zealand fighter. So we'll see what he can offer to Abdul Razak. And then kind of those three fights at the top of the card are the ones that really stand out. They're the names. Andrei Arlovsky. Chase Sherman isn't a big name, but he's a good heavyweight, has knockout power. Who's a heavyweight that doesn't have knockout power. But Jeremy Stevens is obviously an exciting fight all around the place. So, yeah, the last two fights in particular are obviously the most intriguing to most. Jeremy Stevens, a big name, coming off of a loss against a guy called, like Drakkar Klose, coming off of a loss against Beneil Dariush. So we'll see kind of what happens here and who of these guys move forward. But yeah, for me, Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum is the one here.
The thing that annoys me about Jeremy Stevens, right, ever since the Conor McGregor kind of, who the fuck is that guy thing, he kind of got propelled into this spotlight that he could have owned. He could have been like, yeah, I'm that guy, and gone out there and done some cool stuff. I watched a breakdown of his fighting style a couple of weeks ago, and it was like where he used to play baseball. He kind of throws his right hand like he's playing baseball, and he's throwing a ball, like pitching a ball, like super hard and stuff. And I feel like he's one of these people, and he, like you said, he's an exciting fighter. I feel like he's one of these people that he could be so much better than he is. And for me, especially, I look at him and go, wow, I want you to be so much better than you are. But with a record of like 28-18, you're thinking, come on, we need to start racking up some wins here, but where does Jeremy Stevens go from here if he doesn't win and if he continues to not win as he seems to be doing?
He joins Mike Perry in wherever the hell Mike Perry goes. They band together like best friends and ride off into the sunset with terrible records.
But we've seen so many fantastic fighters get released from the UFC. Yoel Romero, a prime example. He got dropped from the UFC, but we still see these kind of like ancient staples in the UFC as well. Prath, why do you think Dana White and the UFC and as an organization are keeping these old school, old era kind of fighters over keeping some kind of young, hungry up and comers? Like we've seen Tai Tuivasa get dropped and re-signed, yet we still have Andrei Arlovski who's taking loss after loss after loss. But then we lose Alistair Overeem, who was on a pretty decent run. And then he lost a couple, and then he didn't have a terrible record either at the back end of his career. Yet we lost him. We lost JDS as well. So why do you think the UFC are keeping these older staples, Arlovskis and the Jeremy Stevens in over keeping and nurturing these younger fighters?
Great question, man. Great question. What I would say is that I wouldn't put Andrei Arlovski and Jeremy Stevens in the same bracket in the sense that Jeremy Stevens is very much a come forward, put it all on the line, knock out or be knocked out, and that seems to be the kind of how can you say the rhetoric of Jeremy Stevens fights, kind of as they played out the last couple, especially. I think to a degree, when it comes to people like Yoel Romero, Alistair Overeem, JDS. I think that they very much are on the end of their career. Yoel Romero is already in his 40s, and I think Dana White very much values wanting to keep contenders and keep people that younger, hungrier, on the rise in the UFC, and to potentially sign them. He has to give up spots to allow these guys to come in as well, because UFC have got such a massive roster now as well. But also on the other side of that sword, if you will, they need these veterans to make names for these newer guys coming in as well, right? So if you look at Andrei Arlovski, he's fighting Chase Sherman, right? This is a big opportunity for Chase Sherman to fight a legend of the UFC, someone who has been around since the very early days. People, if he comes out and knocks Andrei Arlovski out, that people will know who Chase Sherman is. Drakkar Klose is a little bit of a bigger name than I would say Jay Sherman is. He's been in a few more of those kind of higher profile fight. Obviously he's not main eventing every fight night, but he's had credible opponents, where he's been matched up against credible opponents like Beneil Dariush. So they still need these guys around, and I think the two things that Dana White wants to see in these veterans is the willingness to come out and have a firefight, and then to elevate the newer guys that are in the roster that they want to make stars, or at least not even make them stars, but make them credible enough to headline the prelims of a numbered card, or be on the main card for a fight night, or on the co-main event spot, right? You want someone like a Drakkar Klose who is very talented, who does come out and fight very, very good fights. You want someone like that to be propelled up there. So you kind of do need those Jeremy Stevens and stuff like that. And I wouldn't say that this is a toss-up fight for Drakkar Klose, but obviously Jeremy Stevens here is coming off of a couple of losses, a couple of wins, couple of losses. Last couple of fights from Jeremy Stevens have all been crazy fights that have been close, and then he's been KO'd or he's been TKO'd, or he's managed to get the KO victory as well. So I think that they kind of believe in someone like a Jeremy Stevens, but they also kind of want to see a Drakkar Klose kind of be elevated and hopefully use Jeremy Stevens' name to be a bigger fighter, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. But George, what do you think then? If someone like Andrei Arlovski has so many wins, so many losses, he's been around for decades and decades, he's a journeyman. There's no other way to put it. He's a full-blown accredited. He's got the UFC belt for being a journeyman. You know, how many losses do we need to see, and how much damage do we need to see them take before we all kind of, as fans, go, you know what, I don't really want to see him anymore. Similar to what we saw with Anderson Silva. He didn't need to have his last fight. We all kind of watched that and went, you know, it's like watching your great uncle get beaten up at a wedding. You think, oh, you know, he's old. Did he deserve it? Probably, but he shouldn't have really taken too much damage
specific.
there. Yeah, I've been there. I've been to a lot of crazy weddings, man. But George, what do you think, man? What do you think? How long can these people stay in the UFC before the fans kind of go, I don't want to see him get beaten up anymore? Similar to Mike Perry, we were speaking about on the previous episode. How many times do we see them get beaten up and you think, come on now, this is not fair anymore, you know?
I think Arlovski's at that point, to be honest. Like, he seems to be getting beaten up a lot. And that last performance, what was it, like 8 weeks ago? He comes back all the time. Like when he fought Tom Aspinall. I mean, Tom Aspinall made it look. It just gave the impression like that Arlovski is, you know, like you said, he's from an old era now, and perhaps this new era of fighters, it's just too dynamic, and there's just too much for Arlovski to have to deal with. And I just think that I don't want to see Arlovski fight anymore. I mean, 30 and 20, 50 fights. It's like, that is a lot of damage over a long period of time, you know. And these sports like combat sports, they're unforgiving, because Arlovski back in the day, obviously he was a champion, yeah. And you know, and to some people, Arlovski was a hero. But this sport is so unforgiving that when people come to the end, their end is usually quite ugly, you know. And this is an example of an ugly ending, because I expect him to get beat this weekend, Arlovski. I expect him to be back out in 12 weeks' time and probably get beaten again. And it's just, what is the point anymore? I don't get it. He just gets beat. It's almost becoming a bit too easy to beat him, and the UFC having to probably pay him to probably a fair amount to keep him there. So it doesn't make any sense, and I just don't understand why someone just doesn't go to Arlovski and go, look, thank you for everything, but let's call it a day now, because this is not good, and we don't want to have long-term problems going forwards.
And I think that's another reason why they kind of cut the Alistair Overeems and the JDSs and the Yoel Romero's, right? Is a point that George just made, is that they're paying these guys a lot of money to come out there and fight as well. And if they're just going to come out there and not put on the performances that are deemed worthy for a Dana White, then Dana White has that authority to then cut them. And you're going to see that with a lot of the Jeremy Stevens, like the Andrei Arlovskis. I think down in the next couple of months, when you see these guys taking more and more losses, they are going to start getting cut. And I think, you know, it depends on the like how many fights they have in their contract, right? Mike Perry has one left, so if he goes out and loses his last fight, he's very much done. But then it also gives him the opportunity to claw back and have that one last win. And if he can get that win in and build from there, that's where you can kind of see success. But it's a very, very it's a delicate balancing act, I guess, that you got to have as a fighter.
Yeah, definitely. And with the new Venom deal, I believe if you've got 21 plus fights, you get, you know, not an amazing amount of money. You get a little bit more than with the previous sponsors, but you still get a decent amount of money to go out there just to wear the Venom stuff. And I guess these guys are kind of setting up their retirement funds as well. You know, they probably, like you say, they're going to finish off their fights on their contracts, and they're going to win, loss or draw. They're just going to be like, right, cool, and go out there, get some money and get out of there. But like you say, man, imagine if Arlovski's on like 250K for the fight of the weekend, 250 and 175 or whatever, 250 to show, 175 to win. You could have 15 more fights on the card of up and coming fighters that are going to be doing it for 10 and 10. And it would probably be more of a banger of a night than having this kind of one old dude.
I just looked up Andrei Arlovski's purse. He gets paid 325K to show.
I wasn't too far off.
What the actual F? And I'm sure, someone like an Alistair Overeem is on that to slightly even more money than that. Yeah.
Well, then no wonder Arlovski's out every 8 weeks. No wonder he's back every 2 months to fight.
For him, right? He can set up, like one generation of income off of like 5 fights, if that.
Yeah, minus tax and all that kind of stuff. That's obviously pretty hefty over in the States, but he's still going to be making a ridiculous amount of money, and sponsors. I'm sure he gets sponsored for all his meals and sponsored nutritionist and all this kind of stuff. Being around for such a long time.
Just quickly, where does it say where Arlovski trains?
He trains in American Top Team.
Okay, so he's not paying tax then, because that's Florida's no tax.
Florida, and then Nevada as well is no tax, right?
Yeah, he ain't paying tax. He's making money.
Making that bank. Making that 325K bank.
Wow.
But he'll probably, he could go in there. He doesn't even have to bother about the fight of the night or the performance bonuses. He could go in there, pretty much take a knee and tap, and he's just going to walk out with 0 damage, and he's going to walk out with a decent amount of money. But most of these guys and girls, they like to go out there and they like to fight until the very, very bitter end, which is, it can be, to their demise as well. But as fans, we always love to see the just bleed. Do you know what I mean? So it's exciting either way. But on to the main event of the night, because we're really going to divulge into this, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the topical point that Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier are going backwards and forwards on social media today as well, which is unbelievable. But we will get to a more interesting topic first, which is Bobby Knuckles versus Kelvin Gastelum. Obviously, we were supposed to be seeing Paulo Costa fighting Robert Whittaker here, and Kelvin Gastelum stepping in, and 3 weeks notice, I believe it was. So fair play to him. That's as we've seen over the past kind of year, 14 months, that the fighters that are always ready to fight and willing to take those risks, even if the risk doesn't pay off, your stock levels in your fans and within the organization definitely go up. But George, how do you see it playing out at the weekend, man?
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to see Bobby Knuckles back in. He's one of my favorite fighters, Robert Whittaker. This weekend, it's not fair. Like fair play to Kelvin Gastelum for taking this fight, because it makes total sense for him to take this fight. Because obviously, if you win, then you instantly become a title contender. Also for Whittaker, fair play to him, because this is a risk in some aspects. Because if you lose this fight, this does not do you any good. Losing to, where is Gastelum ranked? 8, 9, something like that in the rankings. So that's not so it's a risk for him. A bit like how Holland and Vettori was a risk for Marvin Vettori as well. I said on the show yesterday that this is an opportunity for Whittaker to just push everyone aside and to show Adesanya and the UFC that he is the next guy for the title for the rematch of Adesanya. I'm expecting something quite spectacular from Rob Whittaker. Maybe I'm going to really over egg it for him, but I really think that this is an opportunity for him just to go out there and put on a display. And since he lost to Adesanya, he's come back and he has looked really good. He looked really good against Till. He was brilliant against Cannonier. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like he's in a much happier place. When you see him speak, he just seems to be in a mental state now where he's ready and able to go in there and perform to the best of his ability. A bit like the guy who performed against Yoel Romero back in 3-4 years back. Gastelum's dangerous though. Like I don't rule Kelvin Gastelum out, because there's something about him. He just has that kind of like dogged mentality, that like I'm never gonna give in kind of mentality about him. and that's a dangerous person to fight. But the simple fact is, for this one this weekend, I really think Bobby Knuckles gets it done, and I really hope as well that he kind of sways ever so slightly away from that kind of I'm not bothered, I just want to go home and spend time with my family. And he doesn't need to go too heavy on it. But if he does win, just go, look, I'm clear number one guy here. Come on, Izzy. You know, I'm the guy. Let's get it on down under, and let's have the rematch.
Or even a match with, if he wins the weekend, then even a match with Vittori to see who's the number one contender.
Yeah, definitely. That's not a bad one. Maybe they might go that. Maybe they might try and push that way, but I don't know. Maybe they might try and push that. But I think if he does beat Gastelum, whether that's via finish or whether he takes it by decision, I still think that in his mind he'll think, well, look, I've won 3 straight now. I'm the number one contender. I'm the guy. I'm the guy for the next shot at Izzy's belt.
Definitely. So, what round do you think it's going to be? You obviously think Bobby Knuckles, but how do you see the finish coming about?
I see Bobby Knuckles round 4 finishing him.
Round 4, TKO sub.
TKO finished him. I just think that he's got that kind of like all round skill set that in the end Gastelum's going to have. It's just going to be too much for Gastelum in the end. Gastelum gets hit. Let's be honest about it. Gastelum takes hits. We've seen it in a lot of his fights. And Bobby Knuckles, I could see him just piecing him up at times. So yeah, I'm gonna go for TKO round 4.
Nice, because as we've seen before, Gastelum he's a little bit on the chubbier side. Not that really makes a difference, but he could be a 170. Do you know what I mean? But he's fighting a 185. Very much so, So fair play for him. He's moved between the divisions, I believe, over the past years, but he's obviously found more success in the 185. But so Darren Till had a very close fight with Whittaker, and Darren Till had a very close fight with Gastelum. So MMA maths would kind of go, it could be a very close fight and it could go the full distance. But Prath, what do you think? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, man. Very, very close fight. Both incredible competitors. A lot of love for both of these guys. But, I love when they are also like an awesome, respectable character within MMA. And these two are, I would say, at the very top side of the respect meter, if you will, for most fans and amongst the other fighters as well. But a very tough fight for both guys. This was booked as a title fight a couple of years ago. So they're revisiting it here now. Obviously not on the, we wanted to see the Paulo Costa fight, but these are the things that happen in the MMA game, and you never know who ends up being in the fight. You could have it booked. We have Conor and Dustin booked, but who knows if we'll actually see that in July. We might see some other version of it, some crazy version of it. So, but what of any of the guys in the middleweight division to step up and take this fight with Robert Whittaker? I'm really, really glad it's Kelvin Gastelum, because Kelvin Gastelum for me is a dark horse of this division. Gave Izzy probably one of his tougher fights outside of Vittori. Vittori obviously took Adesanya to a split decision. So I think for me, what I want to see is a more well-rounded Kelvin Gastelum, and the well-roundedness needs to come from his cardio, I think, more so than anything else. I think that's kind of where he's been taken advantage of more so than anything else in the other fights. He hasn't been finished via strikes before. He's been submitted a few times, heel hook submission against Jack Manson, and he lost a arm triangle via Chris Weidman. So apart from that, I don't believe he's suffered a loss via finish. So it's going to be Robert Whittaker is going to need to pour something out to really put a stamp here on Kelvin Gastelum. And I don't know if that looks like a submission, and I don't know if he's got the tools to be able to take out Kelvin Gastelum, because you can see the only one that's really been able to put to style on Kelvin Gastelum like that was Adesanya, and Adesanya, was able to knock him down a few times and things of this nature, but still wasn't able to finish him. So Robert Whittaker is going to really have to pull something out here to put the stamp on Kelvin Gastelum that we all want to see him put on Kelvin Gastelum, right? We all want to see Bobby Knuckles go for this title shot, but I feel like one of the big ways that he's going to be able to secure that is to get a finish here. Not saying that him taking him to a decision isn't going to validate that in any way, shape, or form, because I think he does. If it's a closer fight, maybe there's questions. Maybe then you look at a Vettori. But I also kind of like the idea of matching Vettori up against Derek Brunson. I think those two guys have had a solid win over Kevin Holland. They fight in a very similar style, so it would be a clash of styles, which I think is always very interesting. You know, we've got two guys that are predominantly in the that live in the clinch and the single leg position up against the fence. It'll be interesting to see what other tools they can pull out of their bag, knowing that the other guy is also strong in clinching and doing a single leg up against the fence. So that's why I would love to see that fight, and I'd love to see Robert move on for a title shot here after a win. I think the other thing we should really look at here is if Kelvin Gastelum can win as well. If Kelvin Gastelum can finish Robert Whittaker, I think that puts him in an incredible position to maybe bypass quite a lot of guys here and potentially go for a title shot, because, you know, maybe he isn't coming off of the most amount of wins, but I think purely based off of how good the Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya fight was, I think Israel would rather take a tough fight like that over someone like Marvin Vettori, who is just going to he knows what Marvin Vettori is going to do. He's going to come in and he's going to hold him against the fence for 5 rounds, right? And he knows that Kelvin Gastelum might be able to do that, but I think he knows that him and Kelvin can have a great stand-up fight as well. So I think he would opt to take a fight like that. I think for me, when I look at these two guys and what I think that how the fight plays out, I think Robert has definitely got the superior striking. His distance management is fantastic. I love how he darts in and out, and he doesn't ever stay too close within the two black lines of the octagon. He's kind of always hopping. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but he kind of got like a hopping kind of stance with almost like a karate hopping stance, and he circles very, very well across the octagon and things of that nature laterally. So it's an interesting style. He's also one of those guys, you know, you could look at a silhouette of Robert Whittaker and go, okay, that's Robert Whittaker fighting because of that style specifically. So where did this fight go? I think Robert could get the finish here. Man, it's tough though. It's tough because Kelvin is so durable as well. And I don't want to be like, oh, you know, he's going to take him to the 4th or 5th round, like casual George over there. I want to give you an actual prediction here. No offense, brother. Let's say, I'm just going to throw a wild one out there and say 2nd round via head kick. Because nice. Robert Whittaker's got some sneaky head kicks, and I think that's one super underrated part of his game. And I see, I'd be shocked too, George. I'd be shocked too if he hit him with a head kick. But I think that would definitely be a catalyst for stopping Kelvin Gastelum.
Absolutely, and if he can implement the game plan of that he had with Darren Till, which was the kind of oblique kicks, the side kicks to the top of the knee, and obviously caused a lot of damage to Darren Till as well. I believe he had to have some surgeries on his knee after that Robert Whittaker was obviously very unaware of as well. I believe in the post-fight interview, they said, oh, do you know how much damage you caused to Till's leg? And he was like, oh, okay, did I? That's cool. He's just such a blasé guy, you know, a real family man. He's going out there to provide for his family as well. And all fair play to him, man. I think if he can keep the distance, like you say, I'm not sure on the height and reach, but Prath, you're going to have a look at the height and reach for me now. And then, but I'm pretty sure that Kelvin Gastelum is a lot shorter than quite a lot of these guys coming in at 185. And I'm fairly sure Bobby Knuckles is just over 6 foot and probably has the reach advantage on him as well, right?
So Robert Whittaker is 6 foot. He has a 73-inch reach. Kelvin Gastelum is 5'9" and has a 71-inch reach. So it's very, very little.
Yeah, very close on the reach there, but obviously the height difference as well, I think will definitely pay off. But we've seen Kelvin Gastelum knock out people that are bigger than him, and he knows full well that he's got some crazy power in his hands.
One of the few guys to head kick Adesanya.
Exactly.
Right. Just quickly as well, if Gastelum's never been finished and Whittaker does finish him, then for me that leaves no doubt that he should be fighting for the title next.
100%.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm going to go with Bobby Knuckles as well this weekend. I think he's going to going to stretch it out and catch a decision. I feel like we've seen a lot of decisions in the main events. You know, a majority of decisions over the past couple of months in the UFC as well. And there's so much riding on these main event fights that people want to go in there and they don't want to throw caution to the wind, you know, most of the time, unless you're Francis Ngannou and you know you can destroy a truck with your hand, then fair enough, you know, go out there and swing, man. But I think for someone like Robert Whittaker, who, although, like you said, George, is a bit blasé about not wanting to go for the title and all this kind of stuff, but I think deep down, he obviously doesn't want to catch too many more losses on his record. So he's 23-5 at the moment, which is a great record for someone of his age and his caliber as well, fighting the killers that he has fought. But I think he's gonna play the distance game and control a good fight.
He's both very young as well. Kelvin's only 29 and Robert's only 30.
Yeah, and Whittaker fought literally murderer's row in his career. If we're being honest about it, and I don't care what he says, Whittaker. I said it on the show last night. He is desperate for that rematch. He's desperate for it because I think he knows that was his worst night, Whittaker. I think he knows he's probably never been that bad. And I think he knows that. I think he thinks, and I actually think as well that a fully firing Whittaker is a problem for Adesanya.
Do we see them rebook the Costa fight, depending on the outcome of this weekend, or where do we see Costa going from here? Because I think he's ranked like number 2 or 3 or something, which is ridiculous considering he's fought quite a lot of cans over the past couple of years. But do we see Costa versus Till?
I'll be honest about this, right? About Paulo Costa, I'm not totally convinced by Paulo Costa. Like it wouldn't. I like Adesanya destroyed him. I think Whittaker would destroy him if he was fighting this weekend. I just think that he's just a heavy punch merchant who gasses himself out rather quickly.
Kind of reminds me of Rumble quite a lot. Like Rumble goes in, throws like 5 insanely huge strikes, and then gets tired. Maybe I'm being really harsh on Paulo Costa, but I just don't see ultimately what else he brings to the table. And like, who's he actually beating? Like real high level. Like, is he actually beating a real high level guy? I suppose we were saying this off air actually, Connor. Who's Darren Till beating in this weight class that's real high level? You know, he hasn't really beaten anybody, has he? You know, just Gastelum. Yeah, Gastelum's the only guy.
Pretty much.
Like,
but as we've said 1,000 times, on this show, you know, the UFC have these kind of characters that they want to promote and how they have these personas that they want to push forward and they give them a platform. You know, we've seen people drop out of the rankings or lose fights and then all of a sudden someone else has taken over the pound for pound number 1 spot and you think, but you haven't been that good. You know, when we saw Habib drop out of the pound for pound rankings, I think John Jones took over and it was like, but he hasn't fought in like 2 years and he's won 3 decisions, questionable decisions. Why is that? It's because the UFC want to promote these people. As we know, the rankings are just fluff. You know, they are meringue. Do you know what I mean? They're just fluffy. They will crumble if you leave the oven open. And if you turn the temperature wrong, that's it. They're done, man. They're finished. Don't bother. They're chewy now. It's over.
It's raw.
Who do you chaps think is the pound for pound number 1 at the moment in the UFC? Who is the pound for pound number 1?
Kamaru Usman.
100%. 100% it's Kamaru Usman at the moment.
Yeah. Either Usman or, you know, you've got to be looking towards Francis Ngannou maybe after 1 or 2 more fights, I think. Maybe a couple of more defends of the belt. And I think he would definitely be up there.
What about, I know he's only a flyweight, but what does Figueiredo get a mention?
But the flyweight division was kind of like null and void up until about a year ago anyway.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think it's Usman, but
if Figueiredo had managed to beat Henry Cejudo, I think that would have secured him right up there because Cejudo with the win over DJ kind of put him in that position.
Yeah.
And then his win over TJ as well kind of elevated that a little bit more at the time. That, you know, hindsight 2020, bloody drug cheat. I would, you know, a name that should definitely be put into that list for me is Izzy as well. Izzy has had a lot of wins over quite a lot of these big name middleweights. Obviously, taking the loss to Yan, so by MMA math, I guess I'd put Yan up there as well. You know, another name. I'm just looking at the pound for pound in front of me actually, and some of these names are actually like Dustin Poirier is number 5. I'm like, oh, I can see it because he's had a lot of big wins, and I think, you know, his win over Conor kind of probably put him in that spot there because you know how much they rate Conor, man. You know how much they love Conor. So anyone they get to win over him, I'm surprised I'm not looking at this list and Nate Diaz is number 1. So yeah, so it's a mixture of, for me, like Kamaru, Israel, and Francis.
That's
Africa, stand up, man.
I was literally about to say you've gone full Africa there, man. I love it.
Oh yeah. They're the best, man. They're the best. Francis, for me, you know, when you think about pound for pound, right? Who is the one that is going to win no matter the weight class, right? Francis, with his power, beats anyone. Takedown defense, patience, he beats anyone. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what the definition of pound for pound is, for me anyway. I obviously respect what John Jones has managed to, you know, accumulate with his career, you know, the wins and the undefeated, pretty much, you know, apart from Matt Hamill. That's the only one where it's debatable. But other than that, he's beaten all these other guys. But what does pound for pound mean for you then? Is that the legacy of your fights, or is it who have you beaten to establish yourself as one of those guys that, you know, no matter the weight? That's why I always respected DJ, right? Because DJ, I feel like no matter the weight class, he would have, based off of his technicality and the way that he was able to switch levels of fights, that's what made him the best. And so for me, Francis, with takedown defense, patience, he beats anyone. He really does beat anyone.
And just to round this up, that's why Dana just paid John Jones the money so we can see Jones against Ngannou, because that's the fight. That's the money fight, and that is going to do big pay-per-view. So you don't need to worry about being out of pocket, because your pay-per-view money will pay John Jones comfortably. So just book it for fuck's sake. If just get it done, just get it booked.
And talking of pay-per-view money, it obviously segues perfectly into the conversation that we're going to wrap off the show with, which is the Twitter beef that happened earlier with Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. Dustin, I believe, Prath, if you can get the thread up for me, that'd be fantastic. But just from memory, I could see it in your eyes. From memory, Dustin Poirier said to Conor McGregor, you know, where's my money? Obviously, Conor McGregor said he was going to donate quite a large amount of money to the Good Fight Foundation. And Prath, tell me what else happened on the thread, man, because there was lots of backwards and forwards, and there was a lot of harsh words, which is unusual for this new style of Conor McGregor that we've seen over the past like 2 fights that he's had. This kind of respectable, kind of gentleman Conor McGregor that we've seen. He's almost reverted back to being the bully and the trash talker that he used to be back in the day, that made him so famous and boosted his career to where it is nowadays. But maybe he's trying to stay relevant by saying these things. And Prath, you're obviously into WWE and stuff like that. So what kind of similarities do you see between the feuds that they're having on social media and the obvious, you know, the screenplay character writing that you see in the WWE?
Interesting. I think when it comes to WWE, not that you don't ask interesting questions as always, Connor, but the way that you phrased that one was interesting to me. In relation to how it kind of links to the WWE, I don't know. It seems like this is more of just like, I hate you, you hate me. Whereas, you know, with WWE, it's a lot more scripted. It's a lot more, you know, it's built up in a certain way. Whereas this is literally just a back and forth between 2 people. Imagine if they were just out in the street yelling at each other. This is probably what they would be yelling at each other, rather than, you know, like a beautifully crafted promo talking about how they're going to break down and dissect and destroy their opponent. This is just like, you're an asshole and I hate you.
But that's kind of what I want to stay rustic and not maybe seem as scripted as the WWE, right? Because they're still MMA fighters at the end of the day. So there might be some sort of subconscious, you know, person in their ear talking, saying, right, why don't you say this? This will be really good for the promo of the fight, or say you're not doing the fight.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe a little bit more of Connor's approach here, because I feel like the way that Dustin kind of initiated this conversation, or this whole saga, if you will, was obviously Connor kind of mentioning, his ideas of what the fight would look like in his eyes, which led to, kind of Dustin replying to it saying, that's a fun prediction. You also predicted that you were going to donate to my charity, to my foundation, and that you guys had stopped responding. And he just said, July 10th, paid in full, see you soon. And I think that's actually in terms of a response, obviously he dropped a bombshell there, which is that Connor didn't donate, despite Connor, obviously, before it was going down, the week of the fight and stuff like that, obviously he was like, when they were on stage handing hot sauces to each other, I didn't think that this is the way it would kind of play out, after all of that, because it felt like, even if the fight was to go sour as it did, I didn't feel like it was sour. I think they still had respect for each other. And if you look at, a lot of the post-fight backstage stuff, they were like shaking each other's hand and, and giving each other respect. So I'm surprised that even, despite them rebooking this fight, I think for me, it felt like they were booking this fight out of like, honor and, let's just see who's the man out of the we've had the two fights. Let's see who's the man out of the both of us here. And that's kind of why I saw this fight kind of taking place, very reminiscent and similar to the second fight. And now this is completely different. Now this has completely changed everything. It's changed the dynamic of the fight. When they go for their face off, when they eventually meet up, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be them kind of getting in each other's face and talking shit. And I think a lot of that's going to come from Connor. And one of the things that we were talking about before, we jumped on the podcast today was, Connor maybe trying to tap into 2014-15 Conor McGregor and show that, he is the shit talker. He is exactly that guy. And some of the verbiage coming out of Conor McGregor is just crazy, like calling him a hillbilly and things of that nature, which is, it's a hilarious way of looking at an American person from a European person standpoint, because that's kind of what, unashamedly, I would say that a lot of English and European people look at Americans and think they are hillbillies. Obviously not all of them are. So it's kind of the genesis of where this argument started from, obviously Dustin replying that way, Connor then saying, a donation, not a debt. We've been awaiting the plans for the money that never came. I do with all my donations. Know where it's going dot for dot. Otherwise it goes walking. And as in the case with a lot of the foundation, sadly, you took the McGregor fight over the bill, and it shows that I was right. So for me, that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense, because obviously it's showing that Connor is looking at the fact that looking at the fact that Dustin took the fight with Connor over the title fight and what that means for him. He's maybe, saying that, you're just looking for the money fight, which all of these guys should be looking for the money fight, because at the end of the day, it's a prize fight, it's a fist fight for money. So that makes sense that he would be looking out for the most amount of money. And then it just kind of erupted from there, really. Dustin replying to him saying it wasn't it's not a debt. He's not saying that you're in debt to me of the money you offered, we accepted. And like I said, your team never responded to our emails regarding where the process of where the funds would be put. But, and just circling back to that same point, and that's what I love about Dustin's responses here, is that he he says what he says, but at the end he always brings it back to the same point, which is July 10th, you will taste defeat, you will lose. And he keeps reiterating that point because Dustin has the advantage here. Dustin finished him. Dustin knocked him out. And so Connor, while he, is a bad motherfucker, he's got great stand-up, etc., he is exactly who he says he is. He's coming off of a loss here, and not just any loss, a finish loss against Dustin Poirier. He's going straight in to fight him again. And it's bizarre, man. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are from me reading some of that stuff out to you, but some of the others, you will pay with your brain for this attempt at smearing my name, shooting ass, shelling ass, bitch, little bitch kicks from a shell. Good luck. When you're caught, you're fucked. Like, when I read that, it just seems like he hasn't learned. It doesn't feel like he's learned from Dustin whooping his ass the last time.
But my question would be, right? So both of these guys are very wealthy, right? Very, very wealthy gentlemen. Conor McGregor obviously having the upper hand with regards to the wealth. Why are you having a feud on Twitter and not just telling your assistant to call his assistant to book a meeting as to why this is, the breakdown in communication with regards to Dustin Poirier obviously initiated by saying that he but he said that he would give them money. Why not just not bother doing that? Just go, I like your fight prediction. Best of luck on the day. And then get your assistant or get your, I don't know, coffee lady, whatever, coffee man, whoever it may be, to send the team another email or have a phone call. Do you know what I mean? There's still so many months until their fight. Go to Ireland. I'm sure Conor McGregor's in America 98% of the time anyway. Go and meet the guy. Like, there's other ways around this. Do you know what I mean? Instead of putting it on social media. George, what do you think? What do you take away from that? Why do you think they're airing their dirty laundry, which is obviously a promo for the fight, right?
Well, it definitely is a promo for the fight, 100%. But this is Conor McGregor starting to nibble away and trying to nibble away like he has done previously. He's going to trash talk between now and July the 10th. It's a tactic. It's a game plan. He knows that Poirier, like Praf said, has the upper hand. He beat him pretty convincingly last time out. I've never understood this, right? Because I said this from the start, right? This whole thing back in January was all, in my opinion, although it was quite nice, it was all fake. They don't like one another. I don't understand why they're lying, like why they're trying to pretend that they did. They don't like one another. And I actually think that the weirdest part of that thing back in January was McGregor trying to show that he was being more respectful. Poirier at times got a bit uncomfortable with it. I remember at the press conference, like, I don't want to appear like I'm patting him on the back. I think Poirier almost wanted a bit more needle to it. I just think that this is more naturally where these two guys stand with each other. They don't really like one another. There's obviously been this offer made to make the donation. Now, if Poirier is goading Conor and he actually has made a donation, then obviously that's funny from Dustin. But he clearly hasn't paid it yet, and perhaps I don't know. Like, it's like you said, like, this is a drop in the ocean kind of money, and it's going to Dustin. Like, it's not like it's going to go off to some random bloke and like who no one knows. Like, it doesn't really matter in the whole grand scheme of things. I just think this is a classic kind of Conor McGregor thing that flares up. We're in the months coming up to his fight. This is a huge fight for both guys. Dustin's turned down the title for this money fight. If he loses to McGregor, then you've chosen money over legacy. That's what people will say. For Conor, this is huge because this is Conor's chance to, if you win and you beat Dustin Poirier, you will probably fight Oliveira and Chandler for the title before the end of the year. Like, and that's big time if McGregor's back in a title fight. So I just think this is just a complete promo for a fight. And to most fans, they'll just view this going, oh, look at these two going at it. Look at this. They're going to absolutely nail each other. They hate each other. Imagine what the face-off's going to be like. Imagine the press conference in Las Vegas where there's going to be fans back as well. There'll be a shitload of fans. This is just a complete tactic from Conor, Dustin, both sides. It's just a promo for the fight. It's great though, because I just want to see Conor McGregor like Conor McGregor was in 2014, 2015. That's Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor isn't this, oh, I'm really respectful of you. I'll help you out of your hot sauce and all this kind of bollocks. He doesn't give a fuck. He don't give a fuck. He don't care. He just wants to talk shit and he wants to punch your face in. And that's the McGregor that should really be around. That's the McGregor I want to see anyway.
In some way, do you guys think maybe that this was Poirier's way of saying like Conor's maybe not a man of his word? I think that's something that was kind of maybe what he was trying to get at by saying that you exposing him and saying that you said all of this, because in January that was I would say that was one of the biggest storylines of that fight week, was that Conor was going to donate a lot of money, and he put a figure out there. He could have just said, I'm going to donate to your charity. He put a specific figure out there, And for him not to back that up in any way, shape, or form, we just assumed, right? After January, they had their great fight, and they went off, and Conor donated to his charity, and Dustin's doing great now. And for us to hear this now, it just kind of feels to me that Poirier is trying to expose Conor as someone who isn't a man of his word. What do you guys think of that?
I just wonder, though, whether goading him on social media is maybe not the best way to play it, because I'm not sure goading a Conor McGregor is a good idea, because that's just going to make it potentially worse on July the 10th. He's really fucked off, and that I'm not sure that's a very clever move by Dustin Poirier. Maybe if that was held behind the scenes, it might have played out better. I just think that this is, I don't know. I'm not sure Dustin goading is a massive plus point for him personally.
I think Dustin Poirier is trying to do to Conor McGregor what Conor McGregor tried to do to Khabib. You know, when he was fighting Khabib, Conor McGregor said lots of stuff about Ali Abdelaziz. He said stuff about Khabib's wife, about the religion. You know, and he really, really went quite harsh and said a lot of harsh things, trying to tear down Khabib's reputation. And Dustin Poirier is doing exactly that to Conor McGregor. So if anything, Conor McGregor is going to be the one, if this continues and this feud continues, he's going to be the one going in there and fighting angry instead of Dustin. Because he's lit this flame under Conor McGregor's ass that's like, well, how's he trying to tarnish my name? That's him getting emotional. And his responses were a lot more emotional than Dustin Poirier's. If you look at it from you know, how it's written, the grammar and the commas, etc., that's Conor McGregor getting upset. Or, you know, whoever looks after Conor McGregor's Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I don't assume that he does it himself, you know, sat on the sofa in his Gucci mink or whatever, you know, sat on his phone. But, you know, whoever's replying for him is doing it in a very emotional way. Whereas Poirier is just saying, right, cool, no worries, man. We're going to fight in July. It's going to be great. We're going to have a great time. Conor McGregor's coming back, calling him a hillbilly and taking it to places that is a little bit childish, a little bit school ground, which is what he is famous for doing. Which leads me to believe that it's almost like a reverse psychology thing. Do you know what I mean? What do you think, Prath? You're an eloquent analyst, right?
Hey, my man. I actually think that's a super valid point, man, and it could very well play into the kind of what we saw with Poirier against McGregor in 2014, but on the reverse side, where Conor comes in very emotional and wanting to prove a point, and Dustin maybe taking advantage of that. I think that's a really interesting way to look at this fight as well. And I got to agree, the grammar and the way that he's responded. You know, Dustin sent like one tweet to Conor's like 4, and all of Conor's 4 tweets were like, you know, you inbred hillbilly, F you, F this whole thing. The fight's off. You know, I don't think the fight is off. I think they will fight on the 10th. And I just think, yeah, he sounds like he's very, very emotional, and he's coming in here to prove a point that Conor, you know, A, is a man of his word. You know, I'm a very generous person, and B, I am a killer, and I'm going to come in here and F you up. I think those are the 2 things that I took away from what reading Conor's verbiage here is. The psychology is really interesting in that respect as well, because you know, you made a really good point. Is this is Conor's bread and butter, man. This is what he is known for from 2013 when he came into the UFC. This was everything that the fans knew Conor to be, and now kind of Poirier is doing it in a really beautiful, subtle way as well. By not only is like giving him like nuggets of information, but then also being like very straight and narrow with the fact that, you know, we're just going to meet each other on July 10th, and it's going to be, and I'm going to humble you, or I'm going to finish you, or I'm going to do whatever it is, right? And I think that fits into Poirier's personality as well, right? Poirier is very confident, but he is very humble. He's come from a very tough background, but he knows who he is, right? He knows he is a top lightweight who has gone out and had crazy fights against Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker, you know, Paul Felder, like all of these guys. I don't know if he's fought Paul Felder, but you know, he's fought all crazy dudes at the top of the division. So he knows where he stands in the world of mixed martial arts. So I think in a way he's been very intelligent with the way he's handled his social media. Dustin Poirier is, to clarify, and I think knowing how Conor is, and also now knowing how Conor was in January, I think he's playing both sides of him very, very well. And for me, I do feel like kind of Dustin, if you want to call a winner and loser out of this Twitter war, I would say Dustin quite clearly won the psychological edge here. It'll be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks how this develops. Does Conor let out more information? Does he come on more of a rampage? Does he just shut up now until July? Like, I think the next couple of weeks are going to be very indicative of how the fight will go. And I think if Conor keeps, every couple of weeks, if he starts writing stuff like it keeps going on at him about being a hillbilly and P-head Poirier and stuff like that, like he did back in the day, like I think that will very much show that Dustin got to him. I think Conor's now going to have to, put a tight lid on his emotions and stop getting those Twitter fingers, as Izzy Adesanya puts it, Twitter fingers, when you get all in your emotions and you want to lash out. And, you hate the haters, right? So you want to lash out at the haters. And I think Conor needs to put that down, put on his gloves, and go hit a bag instead of getting on Twitter and replying like and another thing that you said great is it's childish, man. We're not on a school ground here. You're too you're in your 30s. You've got kids. Like, act like a fucking grown up, guys.
But that's McGregor. But that's McGregor. That's always been McGregor. So why? I don't understand why everyone's saying he should change. Why should he? He should just be the childish idiot that he is. That's what's got him to where he is. That's what made Conor McGregor. I agree with you though. Conor McGregor should just maybe be quiet for a little while. Conor McGregor will come into his own when fight week starts, and there's all those fans and there's those press conferences, and that's when he'll come into his own. Because like we said before, we said it back in January. There's nothing like a Conor McGregor fight week really in combat sport, and it will be even bigger this time in Las Vegas with fans. But I agree, Poirier won round 1 on this one, but there's many rounds to go, I think, before July the 10th.
Absolutely. And I think if we don't see the squashing of this Twitter beef, then it may just escalate, and maybe Conor obviously said that he was going to pull out the fight and the fight's off and stuff, but that would just be ridiculous from a fan perspective as well. Obviously, so many people got into watching MMA and the UFC in particular because of Conor McGregor, these kind of Conor McGregor era fighters, kind of like 6-7 years ago, I believe it was. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. And usually 9 times out of 10 with these Twitter things, they do get squashed very quickly and they're forgotten about very quickly as well. But I'm super excited about breaking down that fight when it comes around, as I'm sure it will come around super quick as well. We've got some insane fights coming up over the next coming weeks. Obviously, next weekend we have Bobby Knuckles versus Kelvin Gastelum. But until then, if you've liked the show, hit like, hit subscribe. We do have some merchandise as well. Unfortunately, the t-shirts will take a little bit longer, so they'll be out about midweek. We have beanies as well in various different colors. They are still available in the Fight and Talk 2 original logo. So share it with your friends, tell everyone you know, and now that you can sit in a pub garden, tell everyone in the pub garden that you love the Fight and Talk 2 channel. And thank you very much to the fantastic co-host, as always, the eloquent analyst with some fantastic answers there, and George down in Casual Corner being the people's champ and saying it how it is. Until next time, we will see you soon. Thank you so much for joining in.